The single most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me happened a few years ago. I still have trouble believing what I witnessed, only because it seems so unbelievable. I've spent all my life being a skeptical person, but after that night, I truly don't know what I believe anymore. My boyfriend at the time owned a big and beautiful home that was basically in the middle of nowhere. I don't recall the exact acres, but it was one of those properties with a ton of land. Like, if you walked out the back door, you could just keep walking and it was still on their property. His family owned some type of big landscaping company. I guess I should say his parents owned the house, not him. His parents were going to be out of town for the weekend, so he asked if I wanted to stay out there on Saturday night so it could be just the two of us. Of course, I didn't say no. I remember telling him that it was kind of scary being in the house alone. Just because it was so secluded, it felt almost eerie in a way. Those fears didn't last very long. Once our night got going, I didn't even think about the desolate area of the house. He made me dinner, got my favorite bottle of wine, and for the cherry on top, he brought out our favorite game to play together, Phase 10. The night started out great. We spent several hours just laughing and having a great night. I was sad that this was only going to last one night. Around 1 in the morning, we put on a movie in the living room. We must have been exhausted because we both fell asleep during the movie. This is where things start to go downhill fast. We both were awoken by an incredibly loud noise. It was so loud that we were both covering our ears. I could feel the ground vibrating, and I could hear the glasses in the china cabinet shaking. I remember thinking we were having an earthquake, even though I have never witnessed an earthquake in this area. I wish I could do a better job describing the noise. It was almost like a horn you would hear on a boat, except the bass seemed lower and it was much louder. This noise lasted a few seconds and then stopped. Just because of how jarring the sound was, the seconds felt so much longer. He got up and looked around, confused. We both had the same reaction. This was such an alarming sound, made even more alarming because there's literally nothing near this house. He turned off the TV and made his way to the giant bay window in the living room that looked out into a massive field in the backyard. He looked out the window and said he couldn't see anything. Then I went over and cupped my hands to look out the window. I scanned the dark yard the best I could, and I also didn't see anything. Neither one of us could figure out a rational solution to the sound. I remember almost settling on the idea that maybe a tractor trailer of some kind drove by and had a very loud horn. I know that's ridiculous, but I couldn't think of anything else that could have made that noise. While we were sitting there trying to catch our breath, we both saw a bright flash in the backyard. A lot brighter than the flash of the camera. It was like lightning because it lit up the entire room. We both ran over and looked out the window again, and once again, we didn't see anything. We both were starting to get a little freaked out. He insisted on shutting off all the lights in the house so he could see outside better. I was terrified to sit in the darkness because I had no idea what was going on, but I agreed anyway. We went to the kitchen, which was on the side of the house, and we started looking out the windows of the kitchen. While we were in the kitchen, we saw a light come from the back of the house. We went back to the living room and noticed that the floodlight in the backyard was now on. He was freaked out by this because that should not have happened. He claimed that if it were a small animal, it wouldn't have registered the sensor. I couldn't tell if he was messing with me. When I started to press him, I could tell he looked genuinely freaked out. Then we heard the noise. It was the strangest noise I've ever heard in my life, almost like whispering, except it wasn't any language I ever heard. It sounded like mumbling. I looked at my boyfriend and told him that someone is definitely out there. He didn't say anything, he just stared at me with these terrified eyes. Before either one of us said anything else, he pointed at one of the windows on the side of the house. The silhouettes of two people walked by. The movements were strange, almost like they were swaying by the window instead of walking normally. I told him to call the police. Clearly somebody was outside the house. When he pulled out his phone, he didn't have any service, even on Wi-Fi. This was not a problem he ever had while staying at this house. He always had good service. I pulled out my phone, and I also didn't have any service. Whatever this person or thing was outside the house, it made its way to the door on the side of the house next to the kitchen. Whatever it was trying to open the kitchen door, a door I know I saw my boyfriend lock earlier in the night. I couldn't believe what was happening. I started to scream. It probably wasn't a good idea, but I think it was just instinct at that point. I was more scared than I had ever been in my life. The screaming must have scared them or something, because they stopped trying to enter the kitchen door. We could still see the shadow of them standing outside, and it was even scarier now because they were just standing outside the door. We could hear the strange whispering again. My boyfriend screamed that he had a gun and that they had better get off his property. This was a lie, but he thought that maybe the threat of that could scare them away. With all the commotion of the last few minutes, I had forgotten all about the loud noise that initially woke us up, until it happened again. With no notice, that loud, blaring sound echoed throughout the house again. It was so loud that we were both covering our ears and screaming. After a few seconds, the sound stopped, we looked up, and the shadows of the two that were outside were gone. We saw another lightning flash outside, and then our phones almost simultaneously lit up with notifications. We had service again. Right at that exact moment, both the side door and the front door blew open. 2 doors, both of which were locked, just shot open for no reason. I expected something to run inside, but nothing did. He ran to each door and shut them, and I called 911 instantly. I told them that we had 2 people trying to break into the house, and that they had some type of loud horn that kept blasting. It took the cops a little while to get out there, and the entire time we waited, we were scared that something was going to happen again, but it never did. We talked to the officer for a little bit, and he seemed skeptical of all the information we gave him. He didn't understand how we could have heard something so loud. It didn't make sense to him. He also said that it looked like there was no evidence that anyone was at the house. It was muddy in the backyard, and yet there were no muddy footprints anywhere outside or by the side door at all. He basically left with saying that if something else happens, call them, but until then, there's nothing they could do. We stayed up the rest of the night. We were terrified. Just having someone outside would have been terrifying enough, but the fact that we can't explain what we saw just makes it so much worse. We have no idea where those shadows or whatever they were came from, and then they vanished just as fast as they arrived. Nothing happened the rest of that night, and according to him and his family, nothing like that ever happened again. I still struggle to believe what happened. There are some things that can maybe explain what happened, but then I remember the loud noise, and the lightning, and just everything that happened together. I'm just lost and confused all over again. I have no idea what we witnessed that night. I know there's a lot of people out there who don't believe the story, and that's fine. I never believed anything like this could happen to me either, until it did, and I still struggle to believe it, and I was there. Even in this modern era, with all the technology we have, I guess some things still are unexplainable. Since this story happened, I've been very reluctant to share this info with anyone because at the end of the day, I don't know exactly what happened. It may not be the scariest story you ever heard, but I promise you, it may just be the strangest. It happened last year when I broke up with my fiancée. It was messy, just like you might expect. Instead of fighting with her and making things worse than they already were, I decided to move out and basically just gave her the house. My parents owned a small camp on one of the lakes in my hometown. They would only use the camp house for a couple of months out of the year. Where I live is basically cold and miserable for 9 or 10 months of the year. When we broke up, it was March, so my parents weren't going to be using the house anytime soon. Since I primarily worked from home, I made sure the power and Wi-Fi were all set, and then I moved in temporarily. My parents told me to stay as long as I wanted, and I seriously considered taking them up on that offer. I had spent countless summer days there as a kid and never realized just how beautiful the little house was, especially in the spring when there weren't any other people around. During the summer months, there were plenty of neighbors in the area, but in March, it was just me and my black lab Zemo. It was so quiet and peaceful. A lot of my friends and family were concerned that I was lonely and depressed since I was by myself, basically in the middle of nowhere. However, I was really happy. Being there helped me get over the breakup and start focusing on the next chapter of my life. I was at this house for maybe 2 or 3 weeks when the incident started to happen. The first sign that something wasn't right was when I tried to let my dog outside one night. He's a lab, so he loves being outside no matter what the weather conditions are like, but he didn't want to go. When I tried calling him to the door, he would come over and then just cry at the door. This was not normal behavior for him. I decided to step outside myself and continue calling him from the outside. My thought was that if he saw me out there, maybe he wouldn't be scared. When I got out there, I saw these strange balls of light on the horizon. I should mention that the lake that the camp is on is a very large lake, one of the biggest lakes in the country, so you can't see the other side of the lake from just looking out at the horizon. The balls of light began moving in all sorts of weird directions. I wasn't scared, I was more fascinated than anything else. I couldn't understand what was happening. I had no idea what could move in that type of way. My first thought was that it had to be drones, but there were so many lights dancing around the sky, there would have had to have been dozens of drones, and that seemed unlikely to me. I watched the lights for a few minutes. They appeared to stay right near the horizon the entire time. All of a sudden, the lights just vanished. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen with my own eyes. They all just shot straight up into the night sky and were gone. As soon as they disappeared, my dog came outside like nothing was wrong. Once he came back inside, I got into bed and I just kept thinking about what I saw that night. I tried Googling the lights, and I saw things that looked similar, but not exactly what I witnessed. The next day, I called my dad and asked him if he had ever seen anything like that over the lake, and he said that he had never seen anything quite like that. He mentioned seeing shooting stars a few times, but nothing like what I described. After talking to my dad, I remember thinking to myself that I must have witnessed some insanely rare weather phenomenon, and I stopped dwelling on it. That thought wasn't going to last very long. That night, at almost the exact same time, I heard my dog crying again. I ran to the back door and looked outside. Once again, the lights were out there, moving around in their strange movements. I tried to get a picture or a video, but it was just too dark. While I was staring at the lights, I noticed they were different from the way they were the night before. On the previous night, they were clearly on the horizon, but now they looked closer. For the first time, I started to feel slightly uneasy. It's hard to put into words, but I felt almost uncomfortable. Even though they seemed like they were still pretty far away, something about the unnatural way they moved just made me feel off. Unlike the previous night when the lights just shot off into the sky, this night was much different. Some lights did shoot straight up and out of sight, but some of the other lights remained and stayed completely still over the water. The lights were slightly blinking and they started to get more pronounced. The lights that remained over the water started to slowly merge together. This is when I decided that there's no way something like this could ever happen in nature. The slow movement of the light was so straight and deliberate that it just couldn't have been natural. It took a few minutes, but the remaining balls of light eventually merged until there was one large ball of light just hovering over the water. It was one of the most surreal things I'd ever seen. It didn't make any sense to me. Every theory I could think of just went out the window. How could light balls just shoot around the sky with no rhyme or reason and then just combine to make a big ball of light? None of this seemed like it was possible. Instead of shooting into the sky, the ball just dipped below the horizon and out of sight. Because it was so dark, I couldn't tell if the ball actually went underwater or just kept going past the horizon. Either way, the lights were gone, and once again, my dog was fine. I was completely freaked out now, and I didn't know who to talk to or what I would even say. I felt like if I vented to someone about seeing shooting light balls in the sky, they would think I'm on drugs or something. I stayed up that entire night, constantly looking out the window, waiting to see something. When morning came, I was still just as wired and freaked out as I was that night. I couldn't get the image of the lights out of my head. I spent almost the entire day trying to find videos online of something that looked like the lights I saw. Everything I found made me cringe, not because I was scared, but because of the context of the videos. These were videos posted by people whom I always made fun of. These people were jokes in my opinion, but it seemed like the joke was on me now. That night, I contemplated going to stay with my parents at the other house, but I decided to stay at the camp. Even though I was uneasy, part of me wanted to witness the lights one more time. Just like clockwork, at the same time as the previous 2 nights, the lights appeared. This was the first time I saw them actually appear. They basically just popped into the sky out of nowhere. When I saw them the other 2 nights, they were already in the sky. This night was different. Before, they were all shooting all over the sky. This time, they were slowly moving. It was like one light would move, and all the others would stop. This strange pattern continued for a few minutes. Then I realized what was going on. The lights were slowly moving toward the shore. As they got closer, I could hear this faint humming sound, almost like the sound of fluorescent lights. The lights were close enough now that I could clearly see them. They seemed like they were legitimately just balls of light, as crazy as that sounds. When the lights were almost to the dock, I went inside and shut the sliding glass door, but kept watching. When the lights got to the backyard, they finally became erratic. They shot off in multiple directions, hitting the house, the trees nearby, and even shooting into the water. I was freaking out. I got down with the dog and was closing my eyes. While down there, I noticed the dog stopped crying. I opened my eyes and saw that all the lights were gone again. I looked outside, and there was no damage anywhere. Seconds before, it looked like the house was being shot by fireworks. I stood there completely lost and confused. The next night, nothing happened, and for the rest of the time I stayed at the camp house, nothing like this happened again. I mentioned it to a few close friends, and they barely believed me. One friend thinks I was dreaming, and the other thinks I was just confused. Since my closest friends didn't believe me, I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. That's why I'm submitting this story anonymously. I don't know what I saw, but I know I wasn't dreaming. This was real. I saw it 3 nights in a row and up close and personal. There really are strange things in this world that we just don't understand and can't explain. Maybe one day I'll have an explanation for what I witnessed, but as I write this now, I'm still completely lost. This story I'm about to share is deeply unsettling, even more so now when I reflect back on that night. I don't remember exactly how many years ago it happened. I would say roughly 10 years if I had to guess. At the time, we were fortunate enough to spend the summers traveling. I inherited an RV from my dad, so we would take it across the country and just see the sights of the States. It was me, my wife Rachel, and our 2 children, whom I'm not going to name. While driving across the country, we decided to stay at a campground for a few nights. We usually didn't stay anywhere long, but my son met another kid that he got along with well, so we decided to stick around so they could play together. Even though it was a campsite, it was still very secluded, which was nice. There was a large communal area in the middle of the campgrounds where people could gather if they wanted to, but the actual camping grounds were scattered throughout an extremely vast area of land. The area was covered with forests, mountains, large meadows, and some rivers all throughout. We spent the days in the community area for the kids, but at night, we found our secluded corner of nature where no one would bother us, which was ideal for many reasons. One of the reasons I didn't like being near anyone was that I had a horrible habit of smoking cigarettes. I know people hate the smell, including my kids. At the time of the story, my kids thought I had quit smoking, but I hadn't officially quit yet. No matter where we parked the RV for the night, I would wait for the kids to fall asleep, and I would sneak away to smoke. It was a disgusting habit, made worse because I was sneaking around to do it. I felt like I was doing something illegal. Since we were staying at a legitimate campsite where there actually was no smoking, I had to make sure I was out of sight of other guests. I would usually use this time to take a night walk. I would do some thinking and meditation. I've been lectured my whole life about how dangerous it is to hike at night by myself, but I've done it as long as I can remember. I never strayed too far from camp and always made sure I kept my surroundings in check so I didn't get lost. Since we had been at this specific campsite for a few days now, I had already mapped out my night walk. The first night we stayed there, I found this ledge that overlooked these trees as far as you could see. That first night, I think I sat out there for over an hour just thinking. I made this my designated smoking spot for as long as we stayed at the campsite. It was probably about a 15-minute walk to the RV, which maybe is a lot, but it didn't seem so bad for me. One night while I was chilling at the spot, deep in thought, I started hearing this weird noise. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. Sometimes you get so deep in thought that you begin to drift off, but this wasn't that. The noise was like a pulsating sound. If you make the wow sound with your mouth and keep making that sound, that's what it sounded like. It's not a natural sound you would hear in the middle of the woods. I left the ledge I was sitting on and went back into the woods, trying to find the source of the noise. It was such a weird noise to hear in the woods, especially at this late hour of night. I could also say with certainty that it was no animal. I'm someone who has camped their entire life, and no animal I've ever seen or heard of makes a noise like that. I probably should have ignored the sounds, but I couldn't. I felt like I was closing in on the sound. It started to get louder as I kept walking through the woods. When I felt like the sound was right in front of me, it just stopped. I looked all around and I didn't see anything. Mostly because it was very dark in the woods. It wasn't just the pulsating sound that stopped. I noticed that every sound had stopped. The sound of the wind in the trees was gone. The bugs weren't making any noise anymore. It was so quiet, I felt like you could hear a pin drop. I was standing completely still, trying to figure out how every sound in the woods basically just muted. In the quietness, I heard something move behind me. I turned around quickly and scanned the area the best I could in the darkness. Maybe 10 feet from where I was standing was what looked like a tall, skinny figure. I stood still and squinted. I couldn't tell exactly what it was. Even though it looked like a person, I thought to myself there's no way a person could be here, as ignorant as that makes me sound. I made a small movement in the direction of the figure, not even a full step, and the figure flinched. I jumped back in pure shock. That was all the confirmation I needed that something was standing there. This is where it gets insane, and I struggle to believe this myself. I started to focus my eyes on the dark figure. It was clearly standing on two legs, and when I say it was tall, I mean extremely tall. It had to be over 7 feet in height. We had the standoff that lasted a few seconds. Neither one of us moved. When I decided to take another small step toward the figure, it flinched again. This time, it moved in such a strange way. It almost looked like it was standing in a position that was ready to charge at me. It was only a few seconds, but I felt like I could see a little bit of moon reflecting off its eyes. The figure had large eyes. At least I think they were eyes. I was struggling to see the details of the figure because it was so dark. I couldn't tell what I was looking at. I didn't know of any animals that were built like this, animals that stood on two legs, and I lived in North American woods. I didn't want to move again because I didn't know if this thing was going to run at me. It was standing in an almost hunched over position. It felt like I was standing there forever. I didn't take another step, but I started moving my body closer to the direction of the figure. It must have been able to tell, because it made one of the weirdest noises I've ever heard, and then skittered off into the woods. I fell backwards to the ground just because the quick movement of the figure startled me. I got up immediately and ran over to where the figure had just fled. Whatever it was completely gone now. I couldn't hear the sound of movement, and I couldn't see the tall figure anywhere. I stayed in the area for a little while longer, hoping that the figure would come back. After a few minutes, I could hear the wind rustling through the trees again. It was like the forest came back to life. When it became clear to me that it wasn't coming back, I finally went back to the RV. My wife was furious with me. She thought something had happened to me because she said I was gone for several hours. When she told me that, I laughed. It couldn't have been more than an hour. I looked at my phone, and she was right. I had no memory of losing time. That initially freaked me out because I thought maybe I had hit my head or something, but I don't think that's what happened. I told her what I saw in the woods, and she seemed skeptical at first, and then scared. I'm not the type of person who plays jokes, especially with my wife. Hearing a story like this freaked her out. I spent the rest of the night sitting outside next to the RV, just staring at the sky, trying to figure out what I saw. I had no idea when I could have lost all those hours. It didn't make sense. When it was close to sunrise, I heard a loud whoosh over my head. This wasn't like a normal gust of wind. It was like something heavy flew over me, but it wasn't loud. When I looked, I didn't see anything. We left the next day, and for years, I kept the story to myself. I didn't think it was worth sharing because I was sure people would dismiss me immediately. If I didn't see this figure with my own eyes, I would probably dismiss it as well. I know how this story sounds. It seems improbable and honestly ridiculous. Over the last few months, I've been seeing people share stories similar to this, and it gave me the courage to write this up and share my experience in the woods that night. After all these years, I don't care if anyone else believes me. I know what I saw.